Susan, if that's okay.
Sure.
It is 7 o'clock, so let's go ahead and cite the golden stars together. A clean life, an open mind, a pure heart, an eager intellect, an unveiled spiritual perception, a brotherliness for all, a readiness to give and receive advice and instruction, a courageous endurance of personal injustice, a brave declaration of principles, a valiant defense of those who are unjustly attacked, and a constant eye to the ideal of human progression and perfection, which the sacred science depicts. These are the golden stairs, up the steps of which the learner may climb to the temple of divine wisdom. And so, tonight, Susan is going to enthrall us.
All right, we're going to start with some Wordsworth. Though in the depths of sunless groves no more, the Druid priests the hallowed oak adore. Yet for the initiate, rocks and whispering trees do still perform mysterious offices. If this is all my own interpretation, I have been very blessed at times to be able to have seen a lot more than is really there to meet the human eye, and at other times it has not been quite such a blessing. If we follow most religions back in history far enough, they are based on nature and man's relationship with the natural world. Rituals celebrated the seasons, the respect for the earth's bounty. A working knowledge of herbs and how to treat illnesses exists in most societies, whether the giver is called the wise woman, a shaman, or in Celtic times of yore, the druid. Native Americans and Celts both agree that stones can have a life of their own. Crystals embedded in stones can be used in healing rituals to pull out disease. A true healer can move their hands over a person's aura and find blockages that prevent the body's energy from flowing. Massage therapists are a modern example of the science of touch. If you're interested in this, there is a really wonderful book which came out in the 70s, and it's called Touch, and it's by Ashley Montague. I believe it's still in print. I have brought two types of magical stones. One is actually a thunderstone. I'll let you look at these later. And the other one is a druidic stone that is in the shape of a heart, but has a lot of fossils in it and has a hole that goes all the way through it. The fossil embedded heart-shaped stone has a hole which goes through it. The scientific name for this is Porus Vera globularis. This is a fossil sponge, a product of warm seas millions of years ago. It can be worn as a protective amulet around the neck or hung above a doorway as protection for the people coming and going. Amber, being a product of live sap hardened after many hundreds of years, is also prized, as often small insects were embedded within and preserved forever. When I studied Native American myths and visions with John Boatman at UWM, he also spoke about stones and their being alive. Not all of them, but some of them. The thunderer stone is thought to have been hit by lightning. The thunderer gods are often symbolized by an eagle. The thunderbird has dominion over the skies, the clouds, controls the weather, and protects Mother Earth. The thunderbird is the symbol for the Ojibwe nation. The thunderstone is quite dense and very heavy for such a small stone. The X on it permeates both sides and can be seen on both of them. My daughter Anne often accompanied me to my classes with Professor Boatman. She was 3 years old at this time. She gave me this thunderer stone. John Boatman, who was a very booming, big, huge man, at least 6'5", or at least he seemed to me. He leaned down from his great height and asked her in his booming voice, "How and where did you get this stone?" This was her reply: "I did a dance on top of the pile of stones until this one rose to the top." John Boatman verified that it was indeed a powerful and healing thunderer stone, and said Anne was in touch with the rock people. The connection to the earth, the ceremonies to revere the sun, the moon, the water, the creatures both large and small, these are respected in many ancient societies, including the Celts, Native Americans, and Druids. Native Americans and the Celts both agree that stones can have a life of their own. There is a tale about the rollright stones. They're found in the Cotswold region of England, and this is the story. A witch meets a king who hopes to take over England. He asks her to tell him if he'd succeed and become king. She said, "If Long Compton thou shalt see, king of England thou shalt be." He was told to walk forward just 7 steps. To his dismay, a large barrow, a hill, hid the village from his view. The witch now yelled at him, "Sink down, man, and rise up, stone. King of England, thou shalt be none." And immediately the usurper became the king of stone, and his followers, the knights who formed the outer area, have since been called the Whisperers. The villagers believe that at midnight these stones come to life, and they dance. Anyone who witnesses this could either go mad or die. Doreen Valianti, in her informative and historically researched tome, An ABC of Witchcraft, states, "The sun is the father of fire, the moon is the mother of water. The link between the two is air, and the earth is the sphere of manifestation."
Oh, nice.
Now I'm going to read a little bit from Myths of Avalon, which is, this was supposed to be, this whole talk, there was supposed to be a lot of talk of fairies, but the closest thing that I could really find are in a few of these books they mention things. And this is, the Myths of Avalon is about Arthur. And Vivienne, who is the Lady of the Lake, has decided that her niece is going to be, who is Morgan Le Fay, or later Morgaine of the Fairies. She sends Morgaine to be the woman who unites with the stag. They have the running of the stag, and about this time of the year would be the time that this would happen. And it's actually in tune with the time that the reindeer and all the different stags and those animals, they mate. So she chooses Morgaine. She's dressed all in blue woad. She's covered with woad, and she's got all these designs painted on her naked body. And then she hears the stag coming, and the stag unites with her, and the next morning she discovers that who she has had sex with and who she has recognized in the morning hours is actually her half-brother Arthur. So what she decides is she is so angry with her aunt, and she says, "Vivienne, why?" And Vivienne's voice was cold. "Did I leave you too long among the Christians after all, with their talk of sin? Think, child. You are of the royal line of Avalon. So too is he. Could I have given you to a commoner? Or could the high king to come be so given? And I believed you when you said I believed it was the doing of the goddess. Why, so it was. But even so I could not give you to anyone unworthy of you, my Morgaine. He was so young when you parted. I thought he would never have recognized you. I regret that you recognized him, but after all, you would have had to know sooner or later, and he need not know for a long time." Morgaine said, tightening her body against rage, "He knows already, he knows, and he was more horrified, I think, than I was. Well, there is nothing we can do about it now. Done is done, and at this moment the hope of Britain is more important than your feelings." Morgaine turned away. It was early in the day when Morgaine slipped quietly out of the house of maidens and into the wild marsh behind the lake. She skirted the tor and came onto the patch of forest. With luck, she could find what she wanted without wandering into the mist. She knew two things she needed, a single root and then the bark of a bush and 2 herbs. They were all to be found in Avalon. She had taken them from if she had taken them from the storerooms in the House of Maidens, she would have had to explain why she wanted them, and she shrank from that. She wanted neither the teasing nor the sympathy of the other women. Better to find them herself. She need not place herself for this at the mercy of any other person. She had lived in Avalon for 10 years or more, and she knew every rise and knoll, every path and almost every tree. It was impossible that she could be lost in Avalon, and yet it was true. She had wandered into a thicker patch of forest where the trees were older and closer than anything she had ever seen, and there were bushes and herbs and trees on which she had never laid eyes. Could it be that she had somehow strayed through the mist without knowing it, and now on the mainland surrounding the lake and the island? No. Avalon was almost an island. If she had trespassed in borders, she would have come only to the water of the lake. There was the hidden, almost dry horse path, but she was nowhere near to that. Morgane began to feel the coldness of fear. She was nowhere then in the world she knew. Was it possible that within the Druid magic which had removed Avalon from the very world, there was a further unknown country, a world around or past Avalon? Glancing at the ancient oaks and hazel, fern and willow, she knew she was not in any world she had ever seen. There was a single gnarled oak, old beyond guessing, and she could not have failed to see and know that. Certainly so old and venerable a tree would have been marked as holy by the Druids. By the goddess, where am I? She moved slowly in the thickening forest. There seemed to be a clearing ahead when she moved forward. It was surrounded by hazel trees, none of which she knew instinctively had ever been touched, even by the metal of a druid knife, to cut the divining wands which could find water, hidden treasure, or poisonous things. At the very edge of the grove, she saw a small patch of one of the herbs she wanted. Well, she might as well take it now, to make it good for coming here. She went and knelt, folding her skirts to make a pad under her knees, and began digging for the root. Twice as she grubbed in the earth, she had the sense that she was being watched, that little prickle in her back, which comes to all who have lived among wild things. But she could see no one watching. The third time, she wrestled the herb free from the earth and began stripping the root. A prayer to the goddess to restore life to the bush uprooted, that while she took this one bush, others may grow in its place always. Almost invisible at the edge of the trees, standing in shadow, a woman was watching her. She was not one of the priestesses. She was not anyone Morgane had ever seen. She wore a gown of shadowy gray-green, the color of willow leaves when they grow old and dusty in the late summer, and some kind of dark cloak. There was a tiny glimmer of gold at her throat. At first, Morgane thought she was one of the little dark people who had awaited the killing of the king's stag. But the woman's bearing made her unlike the small hunted people. She carried herself like a queen. Morgane had no idea of her age, but the deep-set eyes and the lines around them told her that the woman was not young. "What are you doing, Morgane of the fairies?" Ice prickled along her spine. How did the woman know her name? "If you know my name, lady, surely you can see what I'm doing." Firmly she wrenched her ways away from the dark gaze bent on her own and returned to peeling the bark. "Yes, I can see what you're doing and what you intend to do. Why? What is that to you?" "Life is precious to my people," the woman said, "and though we neither bear nor die as easily as your kind, it is a marvel to me that you, Morgane, who bear the royal line of the old people and thus are my far kinswoman, would seek to cast away the only child you will ever bear." "What makes you say that? I am still young. Why do you think if I cast this child forth I should not bear a dozen others?" "I had forgotten that where the fairy blood is dilute, the sight comes down to you maimed and incomplete. Let it be enough to say to you, I have seen. Think twice, Morgane, before you refuse what the goddess has sent to you from the king's stag." Morgane began to weep. She said, stammering, "I don't want it. I didn't want it. Why did the goddess do this to me?" "Can you answer me that?" The strange woman looked at her sadly. "I am not the goddess Morgane, nor even her emissary, My kind know neither gods nor goddesses, but only the breast of our mother who is beneath our feet and above our heads. We cherish life and weep to see it cast aside. She took the root from Morgaine's hand and threw it away. You do not want this. What is your name? What is this place? You could not say my name in your language, said the lady. And as for this place, it is the hazel grove, and it is what it is. It leads to my place yonder, and that path will lead you to your own place in Avalon. Like the ritual herbs for the site, this woman had a strange, fresh, almost bitter scent. It made Morgaine feel as if there was some spell on her eyes, so that she saw more than she saw at any other time, as if everything was new and clean, not the ordinary things of every day. You may stay with me if you will. I will make you sleep so that you will bear your child without pain, and I will take him, for the strong life is in him, and will live longer than he would with your kind. For I see a destiny for him in your world. He will try to do good, and like most of your kind, he will do only harm. But if he stays here among my people, he will live long, living with trees and wild things that were never tamed by men. Stay here, little one. Give me the babe you do not want to bear, then return to your people, knowing he is happy and will come to no harm. Morgaine felt a sudden deathly chill. She herself bore some such taint of the ancient elf blood, Morgaine of the fairies, the name with which Lancelot had taunted her. She ran towards the path pointed out, ran wildly as if pursued by a demon. Her voice lost into the woods, and then until she felt herself on the way to Avalon. Healing can be as simple as using vegetables and fruits that are locally grown and seasonal. I make potions for love attraction as well as healing. One very simple potion, which I've given to several people in this room, is local honey mixed with bruised leaves of thyme, and if possible, organic honey and thyme is best. They both have strong antibiotic properties, and it heals flu, sore throats, gum and teeth ailments, preventing colds, and soothing seasonal allergies. Now a poem from Irish poet Seamus Heaney. History says, don't hope. On this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracle and cures and healing wells. The Greenman. These books, you can all come up and look at them if you'd like afterwards. The Greenman's face is seen peering through leafy foliage. Sometimes leaves are actually coming out of his mouth as if he's breathing them out. He represents growing things and the living spirits of trees. He is the god of the woodlands and forests. He's a pagan divinity. His other names, Green Jack, Green George. His feast day is celebrated on May Day, and his image is surrounded then by leafy garlands. His tree specifically is the oak, sacred tree of the Celts, also called the man in the oak. He is associated with St. George, Robin Hood, and the Muslims identified St. George with their own mysterious prophet, Keter. Keter is given the name the Verdant One. His footsteps leave a green imprint on the earth. He shares his feast day with St. George, April 23rd. St. George is associated with the color green. His statues are dressed in green. His themes are death and resurrection. St. George refused to sacrifice to Apollo. His body was dismembered and scattered. St. Michael brought the pieces together, and Christ restored him to life. There is a resemblance here similar to the myth of Isis and Osiris. They were children of the earth god Geb, who was sometimes represented as covered in green, and of the sky goddess Nuit, Osiris succeeded Geb as king of Egypt and took his sister Isis as his wife. Osiris was the great civilizer and teacher. He taught his subjects the arts of architecture, of baking, and of making beer and wine. He built the first temples and taught men how to sculpt and make music. He then set out on a journey to conquer the earth by pacific means of art and music, leaving Isis as his regent in Egypt. He traveled throughout Asia to India. When he returned to Egypt in triumph, he went to a banquet given by his brother Set, who secretly hated him and desired to rule in his stead. Set killed him by enclosing his body in a chest, which was thrown into the Nile and floated out to sea. Isis, distracted with grief, went wandering about in search of her husband's body. The chest had come ashore at Byblos and rested at the foot of a tree, variously described as a tamarisk or a heather. The tree grew to be enormous size, enclosing the chest in its girth. The king of Byblos had the tree cut down to serve as a pillar for the roof of his palace. It gave off so wonderful a scent that Isis heard of it and knew that it must contain Osiris's body. She traveled to Byblos, where she became the nurse of the king's son. The queen Astarte came upon her one day when she was conferring the gift of immortality on the baby in her care by bathing it in flames. The startled queen interrupted her, and Isis was forced to reveal her true name and her purpose in coming there. The generous king and queen gave her the trunk of the tree from which she extracted the chest containing the body. She took the body back to Egypt, where she hid it in the swamps in fear of Set finding it. Set, relentlessly pursuing his quest of hatred, found the body, cut it into 14 pieces, and scattered them widely. Isis began her search again and regained every piece except the phallus, which had been devoured by a crab. She reconstructed his body, making a new phallus for it, and for the first time performed on it the rites of embalmment, therefore resurrecting him to eternal life. She subsequently conceived Osiris, their son Horus, whom she was to bring up hidden in the swamps until he could avenge his father on his uncle Set. Osiris, after his resurrection, was vindicated by a tribunal of the gods. He could have resumed the throne of Egypt, but prepared to go to the underworld, where he welcomes the souls of the good. He is represented in paintings of the underworld as having a green face. And these are some pictures that I took in my neighborhood. And to me, they look like the Green Man. I'll let you guys be the judge, but
the Green Man is also associated with Pan.
right.
And this one seems to have the horns of Pan, sort of.
So maybe it is Pan. I'm going to digress here, and I'm going to read you. This was one of the dreams that I had when I was living in Hollywood, and at that point I met a woman named Marika Kroger. She's mentioned in a couple of books about George Harrison, and she was a member of the Fool. She had been trained in ballet. She was raised by her aunt. She was almost 6 feet tall. She had long red hair to her waist, and she was a painter when I met her. But she had something to do with George Harrison, and she also performed with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. On their first album, she helped with production, and she also did some of the vocals on it. This is a dream sent by Marika. My friend Marika was one of the most intelligent women I've ever met. She was from Amsterdam. She spoke 5 languages besides fluent English. She had been trained in ballet and was a painter. She moved like a dancer, lithe and cat-like, without a sound. Her hair hung in waves to her waist. Maybe because she enjoyed or sought it, there was always drama wherever Marika was. I remember her running down Highland Avenue in her nightgown after her boyfriend's VW bug. She wanted him to stay home with her and not go to work that day. Guard was a master controller at JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories. He told me he'd been put through college by Loris Huxley, Aldous Huxley's wife. He certainly had connections. Guard was on very good terms with me. Occasionally he'd be arriving home from JPL when I was heading for the cookie factory. I worked for Famous Amos in these days, and he'd give me a ride to work and we'd talk. A few months after I met him, I started having dreams of 3 tall, beautiful female angels standing at the hearth mantelpiece in Marika's living room. They held a small blonde baby, which they each took a turn holding. They seemed to be bestowing gifts upon the child. I later saw this boy, Gabriel. It was Guard's child with a former girlfriend. Until I began relating my dream, no one spoke about it. When I met the child, he looked much like the baby I saw in my dream. Another dream, not quite so pleasant, was sent to me by Marika when she was feeling threatened by my relationship with Guard. I was in the tombs of Egypt, a very beautiful all-golden marble hallway, and I was alone. Suddenly, I heard a hissing sound which was very beautiful in a frightening way. I watched as a huge snake came around the corner and down the corridor to me. It was a sacred asp, bred in Egypt as the most humane and painless way of execution. Its face was standing less than 1 foot away from me, swaying in the air and giving me an evil look. I made a quick movement towards the snake's head and screamed at it with anger and no fear, no words, just anger. It turned and slowly left the same way it had come. And that's true, that actually did happen. And when I was 12 years old, my Uncle Clarence, who worked for GE, it was then called Ma Bell, he worked for the phone company. He had been a decoder in the Korean War, and that's where part of my Native American Indian lineage comes from that side of the family. Well, he came home at the beginning of the summer to meet with his mother, who always demanded that if he was anywhere nearby, he should come and see her. So he stopped off in Sheboygan, where I was living at that time with my mother and my brother, and he said to me, he said, "I have a gift for you." And I was very excited because I had no idea what it could be. And he went in his car and he came out with a snake, which was about this long. And it was small, it was really small. And he said to me, "Now this is a baby cottonmouth, and when they're babies, they do not bite and they are not poisonous." And he said, "And now it's for you to name and for you to have this snake for the summer." So I knew enough about snakes, I always liked snakes, so I would make a certain noise to him and I called him George, and he would come and I would play with him. And he lived in the basement of our house for that whole summer. At the end of the summer, my Uncle Clarence came back and he said, "Oh, you've done a good job with George." So he said, "Now I'll take him back to where he was." And he took him back. And it was about 15 years later that I learned that actually cottonmouths are much more poisonous when they're babies than when they're adults. My uncle had died by that time, so I never did get to ask him. So that was that. All right. Another thing about the Green Man is that he's related in another Arthurian story called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is the only literary work of the Middle Ages in which a figure with something of the name and with many of the ancient and Christian characteristics of the Gothic Green Man appears. Though this is the only appearance of the Green Man in medieval literature, it is a resounding and memorial entry. It tells how a huge green man riding a green horse issues a challenge to Arthur's court. It is he that will submit to having his head cut off if the knight who decapitates him will come to submit to a similar trial in a year's time. Gawain accepts the challenge, the knight dismounts and is decapitated. His body rises, and he picks up his head, which speaks like the head of Saint Melor, reminding Gawain of his promise. After the autumn passes, Sir Gawain sets out to find the Green Knight. After many adventures, he reaches a castle where he is entertained by the lord and his lady. He makes a bargain with Gawain. When he returns from hunting, he will present Gawain with the spoils of the day, and Gawain must equally present him with what he has gained in the course of the day. While the man hunts, the lady comes to Gawain's bedside and entertains and tempts him with talks of love. On the first day they exchange a kiss, and when the man returns, Sir Beadleac, to fulfill his part of the bargain, Gawain kisses him. On the second day of conversation, the lady kisses Gawain twice, and then Gawain kisses Beadleac twice on his return. On the third day, the lady offers Gawain a green girdle encircled with gold, which has the virtue of protecting the wearer from any harm or blow. She also kisses him 3 more times. On Sir Beadleac's return, Gawain gives him the 3 kisses but withholds the girdle. Gawain wears this girdle secretly while he goes to his tryst with the Green Knight, whom he recognizes as Sir Beadleac. He submits to the trial by the axe. Twice the axe is deflected, and the third time the Green Knight wounds him in the neck. Then he reveals to Gawain that he knows about the gift of the girdle, and he chides Gawain on his lack of honor. The drama has been set in motion by the old lady who lives in the castle, Arthur's half-sister Morgan Le Fay. Then Gawain returns to Arthur's court a humbled man. Okay, then we'll go back to Robin Hood here, also known as Robin of the Wood, also a green man. The woods are alive and full of mischief. Welsh gypsies call their green man Tally Lynn, who lives in no man's land. The hawthorn apple tree is one of Druidic interest. It's used often as a place of trysting. It is lovely in its twisting, gnarled branches. It blossoms in May. Its sweetly scented white blooms have centers of pink. The hawthorn apple is of the rose family, as are all apples. Its tartness makes a wonderful snack for humans and birds alike. The apples are often made, which are very small, they're made into an autumn tonic with honey and rose hips. It wards off colds. To the Druids, the oak, ash, and thorn trees are all from the sacred fairy triad. It is extremely unlucky to ever cut a hawthorn tree down or bring the branches into your house, the flowering branches, because it can lead to dire results, possibly death. The oak is also a British tree of magic, reverenced by the Druids. An old Sussex belief is to carry an acorn in one's purse or pocket will preserve health and vigor and keep you young. In fact, the old British word for oak is druid, and this is the origin of the word druid. The thing that happened to Morgane Le Fay when she meets the woman in the forest is that she had strayed into a fairy ring, or had been pixelated is another word, and an old caution reads thus: "Turn your cloaks, for fairy folks are in old oaks." Fairy tales are often hidden meanings, also have hidden meanings. This is a tale of archaic Western Ireland when women could shift and become another kind of animal, creature. One of my favorite tales is about a female selkie, which is another name for a seal. The selkie falls in love with a human and comes out of the ocean to join him. Lured ashore, she emerges fully grown from her seal skin, and her skin folds onto the beach. The human takes her seal skin away, marries her, and they have a child. Very unhappy, the sulky woman saw the seam between both worlds and thought she'd always be able to pass through there. She looked for the seal skin and finally found it under the floorboards where he'd hidden it. She took the skin and put it on, walking into the sea, hoping for a second chance at grace, to push the scene between the worlds, looking for a glimmer of the underwater room. Albert Einstein was the one who said, if you wish your children to grow up intelligent, read them fairy tales. And one of the books that I brought, which is just for you to look at, but it is such a beautiful and a very old tale. There's at least 3 or 4 different versions of it. It's The Snow Child. And this couple are unable to have children of their own. And so the first snow, they go out and they build themselves a snow child. And they just secretly hope, the 2 of them, but they don't express this hope to each other, but this is what they're thinking. They both hope that the child comes alive. And of course, in this fairy tale, she does come alive, and she has to always stay in the cold. So they don't really understand her, and they don't get to really spend a whole lot of time with her. She always travels with a fox because she's a hunter. Even though she's very young, she's learned how to live outside in the cold. And I think that's about all I have.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Very good.
Wonderful to have a story read to us. I love stories.
Everybody likes stories. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever had, and I bought it, and I had to order it specifically from Boswell because they did not have it in their own collection. But it's written by this woman who was trained in Ireland. She was the last Druid, and she is a woman, and she lives in Ontario, Canada. And it's just phenomenal. It tells all the scientific names, it tells all the names and uses that the Celtic societies used, and all the Indians, what they used these various things for. It's just phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book. And then this is the Greenman, and you can start with that. Pass it around.
Okay.
This sounds really good.
I remember I was thinking that we were going to be hearing about fairies today. Do you have, because you're Irish, and I wonder if you have anything to say about fairies.
Well, Morgan Le Fay is called Morgaine of the Fairies. I have never really particularly seen fairies myself, but I've sensed other presences. I've always been able to see ghosts. When I lived in the River West, I was being pursued by someone who was, I believe he was Native American. He had long hair and he wore a top hat. And he was always in the same place in my apartment. And
You know, in the Native American tradition, a top hat was the distinguished medicine man, the healer.
okay, maybe he was. Maybe he was. I have also something that talks about when I lived through one of the hottest summers of my life, which was 1987. And it was so hot, it was unbelievable. The promise of rain was constantly in the back of your head. You wanted rain so bad. We didn't have rain at that point in 1987, that summer, for, I believe it was 1.5 months, maybe longer. Rain was promised, but it never came. I was standing in my red and black and white polka-dotted kitchen looking out the upstairs window. It was 12 noon. The bar across the street, Harry's Chapel, was hopping. I suppose the air conditioning was on, and the heat seemed to increase people's thirst. Suddenly, down the street, 4 figures, dressed all in tight-fitting black tunics and long black flowing pants, appeared. Their faces and heads were blank white oval shapes. They moved in a choreographed smooth dance, all the while holding aloft oval white objects that seemed to be lit from within. I must have gasped because they vanished. But yeah, I've always seen things all my life. I never told my family. I would have been locked up. As it was, my mother called me a witch from very young on. These are the two stones, and I want you to leave them in the jars as they are because I don't want them touched. But that's the thunderer stone, and that's the one with the heart shape that has the hole through it. That was a sponge at one time. That's some of this.
That's the fossilized sponge.
Okay, now there will be two people that might want to have their I Ching read, and if you would like to come up, you can choose 3 cards and then write it down. I have the cards right here.
I didn't know that there was a deck made out of the I Ching.
Really? Well, I have another deck here too, which is the Celtic Book of the Dead, and that is much more complicated, and I do not even pretend to know this one.
Can I see the I Ching deck?
Sure. These are also examples of healing stones. They have crystals within. This one is almost entirely crystals. These you can tell have crystals inside, but they've also got the fossils. And then this one is really amazing because it's got a lot of healing energy in it.
You know, Jeannie thought that she came up with this idea. She thought that this hasn't been made yet. I prefer the Yarrow sticks than myself for
Oh, yeah?
I Ching. And,
We used to just use pennies years back. We used to just throw pennies.
yeah, that's what I do when I don't have enough time to do the whole, you know. But
The whole spiel.
yeah, it takes a while.
The Celtic Book of the Dead, these cards are just amazing. The last time that I did a card reading from this, it was just incredible because I wasn't even thinking of my daughter, and it told me a lot about my daughter and her gift with healing, whereas mine is much more associated with Celtic or Native American. Hers is Ayurvedic, and she's very much into Ayurvedic medicine. So it's amazing how different, you know, mother and daughter can be, but she is pretty much of an amazing person. Even all of her friends always say, oh, if we have problems with our health, we go and ask Anne. Any questions? Other than about fairies?
So I didn't hear anyone volunteer for the reading of the I Ching.
Richard might want to.
Generally, I haven't much appreciation of the I Ching.
Oh, yeah?
So I suppose I should.
Well, you could do this one. You could pick 3 cards from this one.
All right.
Well, let me try the I Ching.
Let's
Okay.
do
Oh,
Bob
good.
first.
Yeah.
Okay.
This will be interesting.
Just shuffle them and then pick out 3 and read them, and if they mean something to you.
Well, I want to let you read them. Okay, so these
Okay,
are-
just shuffle them and think of a question or
No. Not sure.
something you're concerned about.
you need 3
Don't
of
tell
them, huh?
Yes, you need
I
3.
Ching, you already
Isn't this
used
the one with
6
the
of them,
fossils?
don't you, or no?
No,
It's
3.
been a while since I've done any I Ching stuff. But
Okay.
one, 2.
Okay.
You can tell me what.
Okay.
Question, right?
Sure. The first one you have is, it's I, 42. It's increase is what it says. At the moment, things are really looking up. Nothing is getting in your way. It's precisely because this period is very favorable that you need to build your life firmly and lucidly. But be careful, the upturn won't last. That's why it's important to work and make the most of this period. If you see something good in other people, copy them. If you find something bad in yourself, root it out. This is the price of success. Then you will be equipped to deal with any lean times in the future.
Interesting. Maybe that card would mean more to a younger person.
Not necessarily.
You know, I can't. At this point in time, I can't say I agree with it.
Okay.
So you know, I mean, just
You have two more.
okay. We'll see.
You have 14, which is Ta-Yu. Time is favorable, destiny is knocking at your door. I think you should play the lottery.
No, I'm afraid if I played the lottery, I would win,
Oh,
and I don't want that to happen.
you don't want that to happen. Okay. Your responsibility must be exercised in a noble and benevolent way.
Yeah.
At the moment, you have lots of potential. If you manage it well, you will achieve great success. You need to conduct yourself with the greatest propriety. Even if your power is considerable, modesty is advised. Follow your intuition and keep an open mind. Look at everything around you with an honest eye.
That, yeah, a lot of that applies, but it'd be, again, something that would mean more, let's say 20 years ago to me. It sounds like, see, but, well, anyway, what's the third one?
The third one is the scary one.
Oh,
Oppression. Kun. K-U-N. This hexagram does not herald peace. Someone has it in for you. Your actions are blocked. This should be where your strength of character should make a difference. When you are strong and you encounter adversity, you need to remain composed. This composure is the foundation for success to come. Firmness is stronger than destiny. He who allows himself to be broken inside cannot succeed. So it's important to come to terms with everything and remain true to yourself. The wise man remains firmly attached to his moorings.
well, there is one person who has it in for me, but I'm handling it quite nicely. So it's,
Good for you.
It wouldn't be your wife, would it?
oh, her too?
Oh no.
Well, yeah, the I Ching is, there was once many years ago, well not that many years ago, when I was working with the I Ching. And I got the, what is the strongest one? The straight, the unbroken bar. When you.
The yen? Oh, the yen, the unbroken bar?
Yeah, and I got 6 of those on my hexagram.
Yeah, that's hexagram 1.
Yeah, hexagram 1, that's
It's the
right.
most important one on some of
Yes.
I mean, they're all the most important one.
So I got that, and that's what I stopped with the I Ching. No,
That's when you decided it wasn't for you, huh?
well, you know, I mean, I think it has its place. But you know, it's sort of like astrology in the sense that you can, I found out, for example, there are 5 or 6 different astrologies depending on country and everything else like that.
Right.
And I wondered if you got all these good astrologers together, one from each, and if they would read the, whatever they call that thing, the same But I came to the conclusion that the skill of the astrologer means more than what actually is observed.
Also the information, I think, because astrology is a system of monitoring trends, and depending on whose tradition you're borrowing knowledge from, how many centuries the observation of trends goes back, comes into play as to how accurate the observations are when it comes to that.
And also, for example, I finally found some kind of a basis for astrology, which I had not never been able to figure out. And it turns out that the planets, now for example, if you hear about Mars, they always call it the red planet. And that is because the Mars was adjusted to red and the other planets were adjusted to the other 7 colors millions of years ago in order to match the output of the sun, which of course when you refract the sun you get the rainbow. And at the time of terraforming by the elders, they found that the planets did not agree with the sun and tended to disrupt its color balance, and so they had to balance all the planets to each give out a color which would feed into the Earth. And of course, the planets are different areas. They're farther away, closer by. They swing around in various, and so there are minute changes in the color balance that actually impinges upon the Earth. And since color balance is the colors of the sun are timed or are aimed at the mental emotional states of people, and as a result, if you can find when people are born, that is their, I guess I haven't moved into it too much, but this is their basic color scheme, and then they will vary with the planets as they get farther and closer and whatnot, swing around. So I've never really studied into it. At least I had something that makes a little bit of sense.
Well, I get mixed feelings about that because recent geologic evidence from NASA shows that within the last much less than 1 million years ago, Mars still had oceans and an atmosphere, and green probably, something happened.
Well, the red is not what was on the face of Mars. The red is the basic ray which it puts out, which is, you can't see it. You can't see the rays in sunlight until you refract it. And so the same thing here, you cannot see the ray of red coming out of it. But the ancients called it the red planet for some reason. They must have found out that it carried the red color.
Mars is always associated with the color red.
Yeah.
I've always heard that anyway.
And each planet has
The war god.
I was just saying that prior to 10,000 BC, it most likely wasn't always giving off that color because something occurred during the antediluvian era that changed the atmosphere there, and it was very much like Earth. Modern scientists starting to prove that.
Well, and the question we didn't get to ask Jeannie the last time because she went on so long was because she had just gotten to the word Maitreya. And then it's like, well, where is Maitreya? The one that's supposed to help us with the Aquarian age. And it's like a few years ago, there was a whole big thing about Maitreya and that whole organization of people that supposedly since the 70s have been trying to get the governments to change their ways, and that the whole financial structure has to come down. And but that was one of the last things that she said was Maitreya, and I didn't get to ask her.
When was it?
Maitreya.
No, I mean Jeannie. When did she say something about that?
She said that at the end of her talk, when the last time she spoke here.
Oh, I missed that, I guess.
When she was talking.
I wrote it in my notes, so I know that she said it.
When she was speaking about Antarctica?
She said, I'll tell you exactly what she said about it. Because I wrote it in this notebook. The light bearers of the Aquarian age, Maitreya, are the light bearers of the Aquarian age. Oh my God.
Oh, no.
I said that and it's like, whoa, whoa. And they hung
That's
right
right.
up. Whatever it was, wasn't meant to be. What did you say?
I said, thanks, Susan.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was very nice. I really appreciate your talk. Excellent.
I had fun. It only took me 2 months to put it together.
It really, for me at least, resonated because I grew up in the country, and we have the land where I'm living right now with my mother. It's called Three Oaks because we have these oak trees that are at least 250 years old.
Wow.
And you know, so it's just.
What part of the state did you grow up in?
Well, we traveled around. My dad was a tenant farmer at first.
Oh, okay.
But right now, since the 50s, we've been out near Ashippun, Wisconsin.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
out in the country, right, with the farmers.
Yeah, what's too bad is when those really old trees are taken down. I mean, it's like you feel like you've lost a family member.
Right. So, anyway, I appreciate that. It's very
Well,
nice.
One of the main hypotheses going around as to why the majority of us in the city don't see the salamanders, the gnomes, the elemental spirits like that is the electric lights of the cities, and the electricity sort of puts out a frequency that synchronizes with our own psyche, and it puts us on this level that gives us a disconnect from the other dimensional levels of reality. This is explained as one of the reasons we probably don't see UFOs in urban environments as much as out in the country,
Right.
because they're supposedly fifth dimensional, most of them, and
I still see them. I started seeing them about at least 5 years ago, but I see so many other things. I mean, I've seen Bess, you know, the little trickster god from Egyptology. I saw him in the River West in about the same summer, 1987.
well, that's very auspicious. He's a protected spirit.
Yeah, he's real cute. You just want to go up and give him a hug, but he always just like,
He's like a tree stump.
yeah, and he looks at you upside down like this.
That's great.
Always sticking his tongue out at you.
Yeah, most likely.
Well, let's finish up with our Annie Besant then.
Okay.
And then people can hang around and ask questions if they like. Oh, hidden light, vibrant in every atom. Oh, hidden light, shining in every creature. Oh, hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. And that applies to everything that you spoke about tonight. This looks like a wonderful book.
So this is a library book,
Yeah.
and
Isn't that funny?
I haven't finished it yet.
No, I suppose. If you want, you can, if you'll return it to the East Library, you can keep it if you want.
When is it due?
Not till we